Hello, everyone. Welcome to Teamwork Design, where we strive to design life from conversation to communication. I am your host, Terry Mera. What makes you want to be a stylist?
I didn't want to be a stylist, which is really kind of weird. I didn't want to be a stylist. I wasn't knowledgeable of what a stylist was. Like I come from I've always been creative, obviously. Like since that 4 year old who was doing that kind of stuff, I've always been creative. And this is all part of like what my life journey is kind of navigating through now. And let's just say I was very, very smart, but also very, very creative. And wouldn't you know, people don't like little boys to be very creative. They don't like it at all. So you get attacked for being like very creative. So you kind of like slowly learn to like kind of like stifle that, but it's attached to so many other things that you're like stifling a huge part of yourself. But then you're just like, oh well, you know what, the other part of me is academic. Like the whole culture is like centered around academia. Anything that's creative is seen as something that is just kind of like no. And if you're a little boy, absolutely not. Like you're not allowed to have like that's not allowed. So anyway, long story short, like I did my first degree as bio pre med. That's why I moved here at 15. Like the school that I went to back home, our last 2 years of school is equivalent to the first 2 years of college in the U.S. So I started college at 15. I knew, okay, I knew I've always wanted to be in fashion. I could not admit that to a soul, but like it was the thing that filled me up. That just when I would come to the US, I mean, like, you know what? When I would come to US, like, because I did really well in school, my parents gave me a lot of autonomy because they knew that, like, I wasn't a dummy. So, like, and I had been taking the train. It's crazy that I say this, but I had been taking the train, the subways by myself since I was like 7 years old. Like I can take the train. I would like take the train from Brooklyn to the city to go meet my mom. My mom, which was amazing because my mom worked at the Plaza Hotel, so I would go and meet her so that like I would like go and do stuff with her after work, and then we'd come home like my mom and my stepdad. But in the interim, like I would get to her job earlier, and then like as a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 year old, Central Park and Madison Avenue and Fifth Avenue was my playground. You know what I mean? So like I was like at a very early age, I mean, these are like old stories. Like I was like a 10-year old, like going to like Charivari and like going into like the Armani store and like, going into like not Neiman Marcus, going to Bergdorf Goodman and like my mom shot at Bloomingdale's and Bloomingdale's. So I kind of like was exposed to something that wasn't part of my everyday culture and situation back home. And like that's when your mind starts to expand even more. You're like, oh wow, there is a whole world that is about this thing, and like that just feeds that thing that you're trying to hide. Like it just when you see it like literally, and like you're able to like physically, like remember like the first time like walking back and forth like past the like I could give a shit about FAO Schwartz. I was more concerned about like Charivari and Barney's, right? As a little kid. And just like walking past the store and just daring yourself, like, oh, I could never go, like, you're looking, I could never walk in here. Like, this would be, I can't walk in here. And then you do that one day, and it literally is the most comical kind of because you hear like the ah, and like that happens, and your life is changed forever. But I also was a kid who was like the first grandchild, and I always knew that I was like completely different than my family. Like the things that I was reading, like reading is also a thing. Like for me, it's such a different culture. For me and my friends and stuff, like on Saturdays, like the highlight was like going to like the library. The library was cool, right? And then like we would have competitions to see who would take out like the biggest book and the who could read like the biggest book the fastest by the next weekend when you have to take it back in. So usually for me, it was like, don't laugh at me. When I was like 7, 8 years old, I would say it would be like giant books on like Greek and Roman mythology and like Japanese mythology and like Norse mythology because those books were like giant, right? So that's what like so it would be like 800, like, oh my god, my book is 900 pages, I got this. I By the time like next Saturday comes around, I'm gonna have read all of this. But in doing that, you actually start to learn things about like cultures and ways that like exist outside of your own, and you start to realize how many similarities, which is stuff that like I've always questioned everything, and I've always been vocal about questioning stuff, which got me into trouble because I would read all of these things that were mythology, but a lot of them had the same origin stories as like the Bible, right? So I was kind of like, well, if this is supposed to be myth and made up, how is the Bible stuff supposed to be the truth? Because I know what people are saying about me, that the way I naturally am is abhorrent, and I know that I wasn't a bad person. So here was another example of like, well, 7 year old at Sunday school, I got slapped and I got kicked out, right? Because, that was kind of like, how dare you say that kind of stuff? But like, it didn't like change my mind. It made me believe. So I started questioning everything because like people, just when you didn't know how you identify and who you are and you just were being, and adults will get really upset, and you knew when you were doing something that was wrong, and you also knew that like what you were doing, you weren't trying to do it, you were just naturally this, but people will get seriously angry. So it becomes confusing of like, well, I don't think I'm wrong or bad, like why am I having this reaction? So then you read stuff like that and you kind of go, well, if this is that, you start to ask the questions. And then I would sit in church and stuff with my grandmother, and like I would hear things of like, you know you're not supposed to like worship any graven images or any idols and stuff. But then I'll look up and there would be like pictures of like Jesus and like stuff, and I was just like, but like everyone turns to this thing, but aren't we not supposed to do that? Like, you guys are really saying a lot of stuff like in two different ways, and it just came from the point of view, it just came from the place of like, you're also saying that stuff about me, and I know I'm not a bad person. So from that point on, fortunately, unfortunately, definitely painfully, I have questioned everything in life. I've always questioned everything, and I've always gone on the journey of discovery. Like, I'm not going to like wait around for like somebody to take me. Like, I'll just go do it myself, because then I don't have to like battle with like, I don't want to go here, like, what are you doing, this sounds stupid. Like, I'm just gonna go and do it myself.
As a child, you ask questions challenging their ideologies and philosophies, and sometimes they punish us. And
Yeah.
that's how often the child loses their innocence, because we get punishment for simply asking a question. That's one. And then that has
Absolutely.
globally, culturally embedded to a lot of society wise. And that's why a lot of, how should I say it, our generations at least were dealt with a lot of traumas that we didn't even know that there are traumas, and
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that when I realized, I told Max, I told her, I will not ever force you any religion,
Nope.
politics. Any of these are your choice. If you want to choose a religion, that's up to you.